Are you tired of all that's happening? Do you feel just about done with the whole lot of it? If it's any comfort, I know I do. Whatever we're being sold now, forever war, fear of pandemic, net zero and all that lunacy demands, I don't want it. I don't want any of it. And so I ask again a question I will keep asking. Who are we? What is our species all about? What is our so-called Western civilization supposed to be? It seems to me the only point of our civilization now is money, the creation and pursuit of money, and that the best way to make money is to make war. To make war and care not a jot which side wins. Indeed, to care not a jot whether any side wins, as long as the consequence of every war is another war. We were told long ago that the love of money is the root of all evil, also that whoever saves one life saves the world entire. The budget for the US Pentagon is predicted sometime very soon to reach $1 trillion a year. The US economy, still the biggest in the world, depends on war, depends upon the sale of weapons of war. That means the US government depends on war too, war somewhere or everywhere, just to balance the books, or at least to sell the fantasy that those books could ever balance. It's demonstrably the case that US arms manufacturers sell their wares to anyone able to pay, regardless of how they're to be used, regardless of whether civilians are the targets. A 2022 report for the Quincy Institute revealed that of the 46 active wars in the world that year, 34 involved one or more parties armed by the United States. Sometimes the US arms companies were arming both sides. The Saudi United Arab Emirates-led intervention in Yemen between 2015 and now has killed 400,000 and counting. The war in Ukraine has earned hundreds of billions for weapons manufacturers and killed 500,000 more. Overlooked and sidelined by more recent events, that war is still going on, still making money. But war in the Ukraine is yesterday's news compared to the latest war in the Middle East. Are we happy with this kind of thing? As the 21st century grinds forwards, is this and more of this all we must look forward to? Or does something have to give? For all the empty talk of progress, inclusivity, tolerance, diversity and the rest, are we happy that war and endless death are the prerequisites for economic growth? The bewildering fog of information out there, narratives ruthlessly and relentlessly pushed by governments invested of economic necessity in forever war is, I suppose, making it increasingly tempting, born of disillusionment and exhaustion, simply to pick a side and cheer on the destruction of the other. It's certainly simpler that way, undemanding of conscience. I say it's at least true to say that talking about peace, far less advocating peace, is the most controversial stance to adopt. I was raised and educated to believe genocide is wrong, antithetical to what it means to be human and alive, and that saying as much out loud ought not to be controversial. Decades ago, we were sold a war on terror. Another question we might ask in that regard is, how do you make fewer terrorists, the agents of terror, instead of more terrorists? Both sides in the war between Israel and Hamas have one thing in common, belief that each must keep killing the other until the other is gone. Is that where we are now? Pick a side and kill the other until the other is wiped from the earth? That doesn't seem progressive to me. As well as the line about the love of money being the root of all evil, we were told long ago that the first casualty of war is truth. We don't seem to be remembering that either. Perhaps the other war we ought to be paying attention to is the information war, the war to determine who controls the creation and delivery of information. If exhaustion, spiritual as well as physical, tempts you simply to pick a side, to see every issue as black or white with no grey in between, then might the same fatigue blind us to how much and how often we are lied to? We know we were lied to about the pandemic, the justifications for the official response, lockdown and all but mandated jabs. We know we were lied to about the war in Ukraine. We were told it was nothing to do with NATO expansion. But now the head of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, admits it was all about the expansion of NATO. Mark Twain wrote that, quote, "It's not what you don't know that kills you, it's what you know for sure that isn't so." The ultimate danger in the information war is believing lies, believing them for sure. But what do you do if the other side wins the information war and all you are offered are their lies? Forever war is a forever distraction from everything else that's going on, everything else that's being pulled on us. Out there in the fog, overlooked and sidelined by the mainstream, but still, for the meantime at least, resolutely scrutinised by online media, is the World Health Organization Pandemic Treaty and the proposed amendments thereof. I say the substance of the changes proposed for that treaty by and for the WHO that is largely funded by and therefore mostly due to the bidding of one Bill Gates, should terrify us. Tedros Ghebreyesus, Director General of the WHO, recently said fears raised online about the treaty and its implications for the sovereignty of nation states are fake news, misinformation and conspiracy theory. He says claims that national sovereignty is under threat, that the WHO will have power to impose lockdowns and mandates and the rest are unfounded. I say those are lies. Unelected, unaccountable Ghebreyesus asks the governments of all 190-odd countries contemplating the treaty amendments that will be adopted across the board unless governments actively opt out, and there's precious little sign of that, must instead take action to counter these false narratives. In every way that matters, the countering of so-called false narratives means stopping your freedom of speech. Ghebreyesus says all that, despite the draft of the new document released earlier this year, which makes plain the WHO wants to remove from the treaty the concept of non-binding, making the treaty binding for all, and to have nation states accept it will be up to the WHO to decide when anything poses a threat to world health and to act accordingly. The draft describes the threat posed by an infodemic, there's a new word to chill the blood, and refers to the overabundance of information, accurate or not. Read that again, accurate or not, implying that the WHO would expect governments to root out and remove even that information which is true if its presence in the public domain might lead individuals to behaving in ways the WHO does not like for whatever reason. In this objective, the WHO has the support of tech giants like Google, standing ready with what they describe as inoculations against wrongthink. Even if what you read or hear is true, even if what you say to others is true, if it results or may result in you or anyone else behaving in a way the WHO does not like, then that truth would have to be stifled. The WHO desires and is working towards having, in the event of what they and they alone declare as a health emergency, even the potential to become a health emergency, control of where food is grown, where clothes are made, all of it in the name of pandemic prevention, avoidance of climate change. Anything might be declared a pandemic risk, empowering the WHO to redistribute resources. Edits made to documents in the spring of this year would empower the WHO to instruct nation states to lock down their populations, to increase surveillance of those populations, to determine treatments, to mandate jabs, to cede to the WHO the control of the distribution of such products, to order companies to surrender to the WHO intellectual property and profits, to accept WHO demands about the redistribution of anything and everything. Let's remember, above all, that the WHO were disastrous in the face of the last pandemic. Who in their right mind would even contemplate giving them more influence next time around? Covering all that this week, online media channel Redacted reminded us of the words of US President Herbert Hoover, warning that, quote, every collectivist revolution rides in on the Trojan horse of emergency. It was the tactic of Lenin, Hitler and Mussolini. In the collectivist sweep over a dozen minor countries of Europe, it was the cry of men striving to get on horseback, and emergency became the justification of the subsequent steps. This technique of creating emergency is the greatest achievement that demagoguery attains. Next month, the UK's King Charles heads to Dubai and COP28. We don't know what he'll say there, but he's an outspoken supporter of centralised power and believes in net zero. If, as constitutional monarch, he approves any surrender of national sovereignty, sovereignty which, under the terms of his coronation oath, he has sworn to defend, then he makes himself redundant in every meaningful way. It's precisely in this time of exhaustion and of disillusionment that we must defend our right to information, the right to determine for ourselves what information we trust. When did words like misinformation, disinformation and malinformation become part of how we are lectured to by those claiming power over our lives? By their avoidance of debate, by their desertion of the debating chamber that's the House of Commons, our elected representatives have abdicated their sworn responsibility to speak freely on our behalf and to listen respectfully to the free speech of others. We are in dreadful danger now, not just of the consequences of wars waged in our name, but of the loss even of our right to talk about such things. I see we are lied to about one thing after another, from the justification for war to the reality of our economy, from the suicide note that is commitment to net zero, to the threat posed to our right to spend our own money without the permission of the state. Instead of the free trade of ideas and truth, all we are promised is ever more censorship. In The Great Taking, David Rogers Webb wrote, "There are monsters under the stairs eating people alive, but you don't want to look under the stairs because you want to keep using the stairs." Here's the thing, are we so beaten down that we will meekly accept more lies rather than ask questions? If we don't demand truthful answers, then I ask again, who are we?